organization headed? You need to understand the long-term strategies of the organization. You know, we want the brand to eventually stand for your home for anything health-related. Not just healing, but health. We want to keep you healthy because we've got all this great value-based performance coming up, right? Value-based payer things. So we want to stand for this. We want to stand for this. What are the aspirations for the brand? Many of you have probably heard your CEO say something to the effect of, there's no reason why we can't have the highest patient satisfaction scores in our marketplace. There's no reason why we can't deliver a brand or a patient experience no one else can do. There's no reason why. These are the aspirations leadership has. Important to know at this phase. And then discovering the brand's potential in the eyes of the market. Right? That means knowing what the competition's doing today. What is their brand? What does the community tell you the brand of the competition is? What does the community tell you your brand is? You may think it's about caring, quality, and compassion. And the community is going to say it's about late appointments, it's about a long wait in the ER, and it's about nobody answers the call light if you're a patient. Or, you know, the community is going to tell you what they see, what they think you stand for. When you're done with discovery and the first 3 phases, you really begin to understand the brand gap you have. And we're going to talk a lot about what we're doing to understand the brand gap. So when you look at performance, I look at key volumes over time. I look at what are your service line leaders, you know, and then I want to test those leaders with consumers. It's really a time where, as an organization, you will look at where you think you are and where the world tells you you are. Market share, top of mind awareness, preference, satisfaction, name recognition, and association. One of the questions I always ask in a survey of consumers when I'm in this discovery phase is, let's say you're going to call yourself the Fontana Regional Medical Center, right? And you call yourself, and I hope there isn't one, I don't think there is, but you're going to call yourself the Fontana Regional Medical Center, right? And you like to call it FRMC, right? And you just assume everybody else does too, right? Your next door neighbor knows what you mean when you say FRMC. Yeah. Oh, the hospital? You know, okay, right. So you've heard that conversation. All right, so I like to test, I like to say, what do you think of when you hear the word Fontana? How long does it take, what % of the respondents will say Fontana stands for Fontana Regional Medical Center? Before they'd say it stands for the Abbey. You know, when I hear Fontana, I think of the lake. You know, what does it take with what you've branded your organization? What does it take until they say it stands for you? And then you know you may be onto something. So understand, I love to know what the name means. That's a very early part. So I not only want to know how well they recognize your name, but what do they mean? What do they associate that name with first? So, because you may get some brand clutter, right? Gosh, I kind of associate it with the Fontana State Penitentiary. Ooh, bad. I don't think that exists either. Pretty expensive real estate. So during discovery, you talk to a lot of people. And I love discovery. I really do, because you become overwhelmed with data, you become overwhelmed with what you learn. But we do talk to the general public. So we talk to the general public, not necessarily first, but we do talk to the general public. So a lot of you, how many of you do annual consumer studies? Okay, how many of you do a consumer study like every 2 years or 3 years? Okay, so about half. So we do a consumer study, we check on the usual suspects, attitudes, awareness, use, you know, self-reported use. Okay, yeah, the last hospital I used was yours, you know, and that doesn't always show up in market share, but in their mind that's the last place they use. It could have been 10 years ago, but that's the last place they use. Preferences, attitudes, expectations, what they know, how they feel. We have some great questions about how you feel, what they value. Okay, we ask consumers, what do you value in a healthcare experience? And then competitive position. You know, what's the competition known for? You know, and if you have a brand promise that you're working from today, and a lot of you may have a brand promise you're working from, this is where I test that brand promise. I will take that brand promise and break it out into the elements that people might be able to understand. And so we're going to stay with caring, and quality, and compassion. And I'm going to say, so, what hospital would you say is the most caring hospital in your marketplace? We'll see what they say. Who's the most compassionate? Who has the highest quality? Don't know is usually the number one answer. Just to tell you. Doesn't matter where I am, I can go in and predict. Don't know will be number one. All right? And we don't say, well, if you had to guess. So what do they say, right? Then we talk to recent patients. Really important audience to talk to when you're doing your brand evaluation, because so maybe you're really doing this stuff and the general population just hasn't heard about it yet. I literally do have one client that I have worked with, and one of the agencies in the room is now helping them. And this client, when they went through their brand work, turns out they're delivering on their brand pretty much every time, everywhere, across this very interesting, diverse enterprise that they have that's anchored by a 30-bed hospital. But they have 7 nursing homes, and I'm not supposed to call them that, but that's what I call them. They have 7 nursing homes. They have all kinds of ambulatory facilities. They have 15 outreach physician clinics that they own and manage and operate. So it's a pretty diverse enterprise, and they're really living this brand promise that really they thought they were and who they think they are, and that the community valued. When we tested that promise with the community, it resonated like crazy. Guess what? They just didn't have any idea what that little place stood for, because they have been absolutely silent for years with just very minimal marketing, very minimal budgets, when it's a very loud television marketplace, right? The big guys around them are advertising like crazy. So their biggest brand challenge is no awareness, and no meaning behind the awareness. They've heard of it, but they had no idea what it was. They thought it was just a little critical access hospital somewhere in the rural marketplace. So their challenge is to overcome that. Very interesting observations as we started to talk to patients, because while consumers couldn't tell us that, patients could. Patients could say, yeah, this is what I experienced. It was just like that everywhere I went. I was here, I was here, I was here. And we checked that out. So they've got a good partner. They'll be fixing that shortly. Employees. We talk to employees. Usually we do focus groups, but the last 2 clients we've worked with have decided to do SurveyMonkey, to talk to employees about their impressions of the brand. Typically what we do with employees, though, is we don't go in cold. When we do a focus group, we already have a sense of where the brand position is going. And we test those theories on employees. Because the most important information the employees will give us is what? Where are we really today? Okay, what's the gap look like? Oh, it's all well and good. They want to be caring. Do they care that I don't get to go home until 2 hours after my shift? Do they care that I don't get paid for overtime? Well, I have to get paid for overtime. Do they care that my manager is a dweeb? Do they care? They don't care about those things. How do they expect me to be caring? Quality? You got to be kidding. I can't get the doctors to wash their hands. And yet we think we're so good in quality. So, you're all smiling. That's very scary. Tell my husband we need to go back to Virginia. No, just kidding. So we talk to employees, because they'll tell you what those gaps really are between where you think your brand is, where you aspire for the brand to go. Employees will tell you what those gaps look like. And we talk to physicians. We talk to leading physicians in our one-on-one work. You got to know where the physicians are coming from. We also do I recommend doing focus groups with physicians. Usually you can get 2 or 3 to talk in the focus group, and then they all talk, and then nobody talks, but you do get some good information. Once again, if you're going to do the focus group, do it at the point where you kind of have a sense of where the brand might go, and you're looking at, in a focus group, more for not fresh, new, raw ideas, but really testing some theories you have. And again, what are the gaps from the physician's eyes as they look at that? If you get to do the one-on-one interviews, you can do those early in your discovery process, when key leading physicians will tell you the history of the place. They'll tell you where the brand's coming from, although they won't call it that, and they'll tell you what the organization can be, and they'll tell you a lot about the competition. And then leadership. Leadership is the group that we spend a lot of time with. We do upwards of 40 one-on-one interviews. When we work with a client, we come in and interview all of the C-suite. Typically, we'll interview 2 or 3 key board members, usually board chair, and oh, you guys probably don't have any of these. that board member who's an expert in marketing? Yeah, we bring them in to the brand team. We get them a part of the process because when you're done, they go back to the board and sell it. They do all the hard and heavy lifting, and they don't even know they're doing it. But they can go back and say, see, I was right all along. I really know marketing, and we are really good, and we're going to be even better because we have a brand position. And you bring them along as a part of the team. It works really well. And they really do have good insights. Typically, that particular board member is talking to the community, is hearing feedback. It's not always the feedback we want to hear, but they're paying attention, and that can really help you through a process like this. And you're going to say, oh, Candace, you've just been out of our job for too long. I've only been out of your seat for about 7 years, so I still remember the bruises and the banging and the stuff those board members tell me. So anyway, so whether you're validating your brand position or whether you're trying to find out what that meaningfully differentiated brand position could be in your marketplace, discovery is the most important first step. You really can't, whoa, I got carried away with my finger pushing. You really can't get anywhere without this data. So like I said, even if you don't undertake your brand work this year, at least get comfortable with this kind of data. Start collecting this kind of information. You can quietly start doing an assessment on your own. Talk to people, create some questions. I'm happy to share some of the questions with you that I use. And if you want some of those questions, just stop by my booth and leave your business card, and I'll be delighted to send you my questions that we use to get through the one-on-one interviews and the kinds of things that we look at. We'd love to help you. We'd love to work with you, but I have a vested interest in how well these two states do because I'm living right on the border of the two, and I want you all to succeed. And as colleagues, I think that's really, really important. All right, so the second phase, you're through the discovery process. We're going into the design phase, and what's the design phase all about? The design phase is all about designing the brand position. So maybe you've got some elements you've heard. Maybe you've already got a position you're ready to test. If that's the case, in the design phase, you may want to hold off your consumer study until you get to the design phase and then test it with employees. Employees are the last group you talk to until you nail down your brand position. Right? So the last group you talk to are employees because you really do want to test to find out where the gaps are. So in the design phase, we're going to try to craft a brand position statement that's meaningfully differentiating and compelling, not only to your target audiences, which is very important, but it also has to be differentiating and compelling to the people you're going to count on to deliver it day in and day out. And that's the rank and file. That's why in this phase we do our employee study. If your staff doesn't believe, the position reflects the organization's priorities, they're never going to act on it. No brand is stronger than the last person someone encounters in an experience, right? If the Starbucks I go to has someone working at the counter that can't get me what I've ordered, what's my memory for that? What's my brand memory for that Starbucks? Well, I will go test another Starbucks if I'm loyal, but I may never go back to that one. And that franchise owner is not going to be happy at the end of the day. So it's only as strong as the last person. So brand position development is a tricky thing. There's one approach. I call it the kitchen sink approach. Let's just throw it all in. We can do it all, right? We're caring, we have quality, we have great outcomes, we have great technology, we have the best brains in the marketplace, we have this, we have this, we have this. I call it the kitchen sink approach. Tell me what makes it that meaningfully differentiated from anybody else, right? Is there anything that's really going to stand out? First of all, there are very few people in your market that don't think your hospital doesn't have it all. They don't know enough about the nuances between what we can do and what we can't do in some of our organizations. People are most shocked when they're in a bed and a doctor comes in to say, I have to transfer you to somewhere because we don't do that here. They're shocked. How can you be a hospital if you don't do that? So it's fascinating how the average consumer thinks. So the kitchen sink method doesn't really work. Understand who you are fundamentally and what is going to make a difference to the average consumer. Then there's the throw a dart at the board. Pick one, anyone. we can do it all, so then just go ahead and pick one. We'll be known for technology. Good luck with that. Because, technology is a moving, it's a moving target, right? You have this piece of equipment today, well, there's a new and better one out, and so your competition bought that, well, then you got to go get a new and better and shinier, and then they got to go get a new and better and shinier, and oh my gosh, now we got to go get doctors that know how to use the new and shinier and better, and we got to retrain everybody, and, so that's a moving target. You have to be careful what you build your brand around is sustainable for the long term. It's not subject to this year's survey. Another reason why I don't like to build brands around things that are scores. Because what happens if you don't make the list next year? Oh my God, everybody's gone marketing first. Because they were talking about it, they should have known better. What are you going to say? All right, explain away the survey. That'll work. So what we do a lot of focus groups in the design phase. We really engage the brand team. We bring back the data. We bring back the evidence to the brand team to say, well, this is what you all said. This is what doctors told us in a focus group. This is what consumers are telling us we're known for. So how do we reconcile all of this? How do we begin to work through that? And this is where the brand team really starts to do the work. It has to be meaningfully differentiated, and I keep repeating that because it is the most important element of your brand. It has to be something that no one else can really say about them and themselves and say it in a credible, meaningful way. It also has to be understood and valued by the target that you're trying to reach. Understood and valued. So that's the even trickier part. All the more reason to go back to what I started this with, and that is the experience is so important. Because your market understands and values how they feel, how you make them feel. They assume, if I can get better, you'll get me there. So why am I going to choose you over somebody else? Because you're going to make me feel good about that choice along the way. So we talk about activation as a part of the development phase. The development phase is when we write our activation plan, and this is phase 3. We've designed our brand position, we've tested it with everyone we need to test it with, and we now understand we have some gaps, right? We have some gaps. They might be experience related. They could be our naming architecture is all wrong, that we've added so much confusion with what we call ourselves and what we call things, because we've got the Tom Smith Imaging Center, we've got the Harry and Mary Cancer Center, and we've got, let's be socially correct, we've got Bill and Fred's, Aging Center. So we've got all these great things, but people gave us money. Be very careful. Your brand shouldn't rely on somebody knowing the guy in town who had all the money. Your brand should rely on your brand. You can name a building, but be careful about naming programs and services and things that are direct descendants of your brand. Okay, be careful what you name the children, please. It will affect your brand. So maybe you've got some architecture issues. This is a great time to address, okay, right? And you've got some experience issues. This is so internally, I break the brand gap closing. I call it the activation plan. Sounds better. And so I break it into 2 parts. You have an internal piece and an external piece. Here are some things I've learned about brand position statements, sort of unilaterally. They tend to take on a couple of key aspects. There's this part of the brand position, typically, that it's up to the organization to deliver on. Leadership has to make the right decisions. So if part of your brand is about, we're going to offer people the latest technology and the most sophisticated means, access to the latest and greatest, whatever. So somebody in leadership can write a check for some of that, right? It's not up to the person who's at the front desk in the ER to deliver on the latest and greatest technology. So it's really beyond the scope of what an employee can do. And they'll tell you that. When you do the survey, they'll look at that part of the brand and they'll go, what do I got to do with that? I'm just trying to get these people through the door. That's not up to me. So you have aspects of your brand that may be organizational in nature. But every successful brand has to train a barista, right? Every successful brand has to be sure that the Nike shoe doesn't fall apart when they wear it, or the golf ball doesn't get a rip every time somebody hits it with a decent drive. Because if Tiger Woods can drive that ball and use the same ball all day, I ought to be able to as a duffer, right? I ought to be able to use that golf ball. So somebody's got to be paying attention to the product. And there is some individual accountability for the delivery of the brand, no matter how you define that brand experience. Pay attention to what employees tell you most about that brand gap. The one that's going to rely on them and their colleague and their manager and the folks down in radiology and over in lab, and how is your organization working together on the delivery of your brand experience? The employees will tell you about that. That's the most important input they're going to give you about the credibility of that brand gap and addressing it. So you may be focusing on your brand experience during the development phase, writing a plan for how are we going to improve this experience. And there's a lot of folks out there that will help you with that. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want your competition to know, but I bet there's a lot of Studer folks in the room who've had some Studer coaching in your organizations and some Studer work. That's about a brand experience in many ways. Very prescriptive approach, but a good one. Works, Baptist Leadership Institute, same thing, prescriptive approach, a lot of good tools there. Some organizations say, if we can just do some of these things better and more consistently, we're going to improve what's broken in some of that inpatient experience. But others have gone out and actually hired experienced folks. If you're thinking about how to approach your experience work, your brand experience work, as you're going to write an internal activation plan, I encourage you to get this book from Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore. I've read it many times. I don't think there's a single reference to healthcare in here, but I can tell you there's a consulting firm that has built their entire healthcare consulting practice on the essence of this book. And through that process, they have created an approach that helps you design an intentional, individual, inspired, and an individual experience for patients that really makes a difference. And they use that book. The company name is Star Eisen. And one of the partners is Joe Pine, who co-authored this book. So just to get your creative juices flowing, I encourage you to read the book, The Experience Economy. Joe Pine, Jim Gilmore. Work is theater, and every business is a stage. And it's really good. It's got a lot of good things that you'll just go, oh, yeah, imagine if we thought about it that way. I've actually worked with 3 different organizations that have worked with these folks to create experiences. And I can tell you that the product at the end of the day is different than anything you've ever seen. And having amazing, most importantly, amazing results on volumes and preference and use. So anyway, not a commercial, just a passion. Brand signals. What are your brand signals going to be internally to your audience? Signals are an important thing. How are you going to engage staff consistently and across the organization? What signals can you put in place to help with that? Tools, techniques, and inspiring things. When we worked with a client on a cancer center experience redesign, we put in place a lot of brand signals because they said, cancer is really a journey. And we want people to see us as their partner on that journey because it's a very lonely journey. We've learned that from talking to patients. Cancer is one of the loneliest diagnoses you can get. And it's very scary. I don't need to tell you that. But so this team said, we know if we could be a partner with these folks on their journey, a partner they can count on and come to and feel compassionate about. So they changed everything from what they call each other. They put guides in place. They aren't social workers anymore, they're guides. They just really did a lot of brand signals as they went through so that the staff would constantly remember, am I being a partner on this journey or am I doing my job? And hugely successful to find those triggers. And we engaged the staff to say, what would those signals be? What would help you do this more consistently, more regularly? Brand architecture, here's where you design what is it you have to fix about the architecture, if anything. Okay, maybe the logo is no longer you, the new you. If you're going to be caring, quality, and compassion, maybe you shouldn't be a shield of armor for a logo. Don't know, just saying. Good time to think about that and look into that. Okay? And what's your brand story? This is why it's so valuable to have your ad agency at the table with you as a partner on the brand team. I love it when my clients say, we've got an agency we really want to work with, we've got a very good connection. I say, then let's put your account rep on the brand team. You're going to pay them for 2 hours a meeting, but they should be there. They should be a part of the brand team. Let them get the value of all that great discovery work firsthand. Let them hear these powerful conversations going on among the leadership and how the organization is going to embrace this. Because they'll take that back and that will drive creative. That will drive what you need. So I turn to the agency at this point and say, give us a brand story. Because I'll tell you what, the brand promise itself doesn't motivate many employees. I've not seen one written yet that motivates an employee. And I tell people when we create a brand promise, there's nobody except the folks on the brand team that are ever going to see it written this way. Because the promise is about content, not about style. But your brand story should be the style part. It should be what's going to motivate people to do their piece of that brand and keep it alive. Inform the agency about this is what's driving this organization. This is what's compelling to the customers and the consumers. Find the key messages in this and the inspiration for those messages. So I encourage everyone to get a good brand story written at this point, now that you know what the promise is. And then you always, internally, as a part of your activation plan, at the close of this, when you're ready to rock and roll externally, go first internal. Now I know you guys probably, at least half of you, have responsibility for the internal communications in your organization as well. It's so critical to let the employees see what's going to happen and what you're going to say to the world about what they're going to do for you next, right? Very important, very critical. Get them on board, get them talking. Externally, that activation plan then is again about architecture. You may have some external implications. You may have to launch a new logo. You may be launching some new names. You may have to redo your maps. You may have all kinds of stuff. Most of the external activation is marketing. This is where you own the brand at this point. The messages get created. If a tagline is what you need, your agency should be able to help you get there. Maybe something rose out of all those discussions along the way that is your tagline. But just remember, the tagline is not the brand promise. It's just yet another expression of what that promise should mean. And then you have to decide, do you have the resources to do a campaign broadly just about the brand position? Or does it make more sense with the resources you have to say, you know, I've got 4 key service lines that are profitable, that are going to get me where we need to go for our volume targets, and I got to build my brand message around those 4 service areas, service lines. Number 1, be sure they're ready to go, they have capacity. Okay. Number 2, be sure they're on brand. Do some secret shopping. Are they delivering the brand experience that you're about to promise? And are they really profitable? So if they do those 3, I call that the test, my 3 tests. If they do those things, there is no reason not to be wildly successful with your brand implementation by focusing first on a couple key service lines. You don't have to, go out and ask for another $300,000 so I have more advertising budget because we want to talk about the brand. You can do it with the resources you have. The deployment phase is the implementation phase. So in the deployment phase, you're now doing whatever you need to do to close brand gaps. Maybe you don't need a deployment phase. Maybe you don't have an experience gap. Maybe you have just the opportunity to talk differently about yourself, and you're ready to move right into the display phase. So you may have to order some signage. You may have to do some things during this deploy phase. It's really hard for me to tell you how long that's going to take because I don't know the size and depth of your brand gaps. So frequently the gaps that need closing are experience related. We talked about that, getting some help. One of the most powerful things Scott Bedbury had to say about this is to remind us that the core of every brand is people, right? Everyone that touches the brand is either an asset or a liability. Every touch point, every message, every customer, employee, and person has more influence today on your brand than ever before. Key thing. So it's probably not going to be your case you don't have some experience work to do somewhere. You may have some pockets where the brand isn't on target, and it's really during this deploy phase that you work to close those gaps. And I know I'm almost out of time, but this is fun. Okay, so bear with me for just a few minutes. And then I want to give you some numbers, because I promised you I'd tell you what it would cost to do work like this, and some things you might want to start thinking about as you build your budgets. So they told me I could have 5 more minutes because they didn't tell me they were taking 5 away from me in the beginning. So one of the things I do when I do this process, in the discovery phase, I ask folks about 8 big brands, and I've got 6 of them up here. I ask them about 8 big brands, and I say, okay, we're in healthcare. We're not worrying about hamburgers. I'm not worrying about the stuff that's going on here. But what could we in healthcare learn from these big brands and apply it? And so, again, some of the answers I get are like, wow, I can't believe that person just got there that quickly. So it was a cardiologist that made me say wow the other day, and I'll tell you why. But, so what could we learn from Apple stores, right? And I was hoping to be able to open this up and let you throw some things at me. Time's not going to let us do this, so let me throw some stuff more at you. So Apple stores, right? Apple stores, the Apple Store experience is very unique. You can go to Best Buy and buy any Apple product. If they don't have it, they can order it for you, right? You can go to Best Buy and get it, but what can't you get? You can't get an Apple expert. Some of the geeks are getting there, but they're not there, right? They call themselves geeks. It's a geek squad at Best Buy. But at the Apple Store, everybody knows Apple. And they really want you to have a good Apple experience, right? So one of the things that, that one of the people I asked this of in leadership said, you know, isn't it interesting? I can make an appointment online at my closest Apple store. I can make an appointment. I don't have to give them a credit card to make an appointment. I don't have to give them my life history. I don't have to tell them how much I weigh. I don't have to tell them what color my hair is. I don't have to do anything. I can just make an appointment. If I can give them a little hint of what my problem is, they know which tech to line me up with. But I can go in, and when I get there, my name is on the board they're expecting me. Isn't that great? When my time rolls around, they call my name. That's even better. So I don't have to show up 3 hours early in queue and get in line to get help. I can make an appointment and they'll call me at that time. And they check me in when I walk in the door. So they know I'm there and they were expecting me. And anybody in the store can help me get what I need next. Anybody. It's just amazing they can do that. I asked them about Southwest. Again, they talked about cost effectiveness. That they're able to get me where I'm going safely. Big deal in airlines, I'm on them all the time. They can get me where I'm going safely. They can usually, if I have enough opportunity to plan ahead, they can get me there pretty cost effectively. And they can actually make it pleasant while I'm going. Now, they don't give me a first class seat if I fly them 800 times that year. But they will give me some perks if I fly that often. But I know that I can get where I'm going, and I can, if cost is important to me, they deliver on it every time. And I said, well, so what could we learn in healthcare? Well, they said, you know, they have a way of moving a lot of people very quickly, very efficiently. Standardization has really worked for Southwest Airlines. Now, you think about that, and standardization is sort of the opposite of what we want to do in healthcare, except for when it comes to quality. Standardization has proved to be very effective in improving quality. So what you want to standardize are those things that aren't so relevant to the experience for the customer, right? You want it to be relevant to the operations, to the effectiveness of being able to do what people expect you to do, that standardization. Like everybody puts the results on my chart. McDonald's. Anybody ever seen green arches? But I like green. It's my franchise. I like green. Why can't I have green arches? Because McDonald's has found that being able to recognize a McDonald's universally anywhere in the world is of great value. Anybody ever had a 4-year-old in the car who saw the arches? Done. Question answered. It isn't about parents finding McDonald's, right? Not at all. So being recognizable, being consistent, being cost effective again. Do you ever walk into McDonald's and say, gosh, I'm going to be late for a meeting. I hope I get out of here in time. That's why you picked McDonald's, because you know you'll get in and get out, right? A hamburger is a hamburger, but you'll know you'll have it, and you're in and you're out and you're where you need to be. Starbucks, again, consistency is that they recognize you as a person. They really like that. They said, if my barista can remember me, why can't the lady in registration at the cancer center remember me? I've been here every day for the last 3 weeks. I still have to tell her what church I go to, because our registration system says you have to go through everything on the list, right, and re-register. I think we're getting better. I have to tell you about Disney, because this is the one the cardiologist blew me away on. Maybe you all got a cardiologist like this. I don't know, but he was the first one I'd met like this. I go, what about Disney? What does Disney do? Disneyland, not Disney the enterprise, but Disneyland the destination. What do they do that we could learn from in healthcare? And he looked at me and he goes, I have 3 kids who want to go there every year. And the thing that strikes me is that they have now made the wait in line a part of the ride. So why can't we do that in our ER? Why can't we do that in our waiting rooms? Why can't we make it a part of the appointment experience? Why aren't we educating patients while they're waiting for our schedule to catch up with their appointment? Why can't we do more to engage the patients while the minute they walk into our building to make the wait a part of the appointment? I'm like, wow, I'm using that. That is great. And it was great. I mean, it was very insightful. So we can learn a lot by going outside of industry. And this is another one if you get a chance to sit down with your executives and try, take these companies and say, what could we learn here in our place? We could do differently and learn from some of these big brands that are huge, huge, huge customer satisfiers. Come on, don't freeze. So display is actually making that brand promise. It's putting your swoosh on things. It's telling people what to expect from the nuts you're going to serve. It's putting that stamp of Intel Inside on your brand. It's telling the world what you stand for. What are you guaranteeing? What are you promising to the world? So the final phase is all about that. So how do you know if you need help to go through this, right? I've just given you the cookbook. Do you still need a class? Do you still need help? Do you need a partner? Do you need a chef to take along? So ask yourself these questions. Will you be seen as objective enough as you go through all of these stages and you look at opportunities? Is the leadership of your organization going to do it because you said so or because you've come to those conclusions? Would it help to have an outsider help get that group to a shared conclusion? Do you have the internal resources to make this happen in a timely fashion? And I have to tell you, when I ask my clients about these, I took a poll of all my past clients. Why did you decide to get help when you went through this? That was the number one answer. I just don't have the internal resources to dedicate to it. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of meetings to arrange. There's a lot of slide decks to prepare. There's a lot of data to interpret. We really appreciated that we didn't have to dedicate staff to this full time because we have enough on our plate. Now, you guys may be the exception. Maybe you have some capacity. Could be. And that's okay. I mean, it just know that it's very time intensive. Sometimes struggles arise. Do you have the operational credibility in the organization to challenge your chief nursing executive when she says the experience is exactly what it should be? Do you have the power in the organization, or does your immediate executive have the willingness to stand up and say to operations, not so, let's look at the evidence again? Can you do that and keep your credibility? So oftentimes that can be a big piece, and you'll kind of know if you're going to be in that spot or not. And finally, will you be able to guide your organization to embrace what is uniquely yours? Or will you find yourself with that kitchen sink problem going on? That they really can't grasp this notion of meaningfully differentiated, and this is uniquely ours. So those are just some things to think about. What'll it cost? So I challenge you to create a realistic budget and timeline. We don't get to use Donald Trump's account. We'll have to use our own. If you get help from the outside, be sure that those helping you don't have a stake in the outcome. So sometimes it's nice to have that third-party check that the answer isn't just in advertising, or it's not going to be, and you got to go out and hire someone to recreate your entire experience. You want to be sure that the outcome is neutral to the person who's guiding you through this. So if you're not sure about that, then maybe you will be better doing this on your own and coming to your own conclusions. And then finally, make sure that the work and the approach takes into consideration, don't use a cookbook. Have it take into consideration how your organization does work and accomplishes work and gets a job done and makes decisions. There's lots of suggestions for how you go about it, lots of things you could do first and second and third, but at the end of the day, this is your brand. This is your brand work. It needs to reflect the personality of your organization. Generally speaking, this is really, really generally speaking, with a margin of error that's this big. But the in-depth interviews can be really time-consuming. You have to figure at least an hour per interview. And if you do about 40 of those, that's a whole work week, right? So that can get expensive if you're paying an outsider to do it. And you can get a lot of, so being efficient and effective with that time and that scheduling is really critical. When I'm working with a client, I help them out by suggesting that we send out the questionnaires in advance. Let the folks we're going to meet with an interview see the questions, write some answers down, have some thoughts, because I can tell you that surgeon who came up with Walter Matthau had some time to think about that. I didn't hit him cold with it, right? The cardiologist who said, make the wait a part of the ride, had some time to think about that when I said Disney. So consumer studies, quantitative studies can cost you in the ballpark of $25,000 to $40,000. It depends on the size of the study. It depends on the methodology you choose. More and more organizations are going towards online surveying if they can get a large enough participation base, and that's going to really be dependent on the size of your market and who you're trying to reach. Focus groups. I've given you some pricing here for focus groups. Again, you're going to have access to the slide decks. These are all ballparks. Sometimes you can do them much more effectively if, as the organization, you take the responsibility for, filling the panels and taking care of the incentives through things you can give them. You can bring the costs way down. This was using outside resources for almost everything, right? Brand consultation, a process expert. I have seen these prices come in RFP responses. Probably the lowest I've seen is about $80,000 for the whole project, right? Now, if you carve out pieces of it, you do, and the consultant does, you should be able to bring that down. And then all the way up to well into the six figures. It just depends. Scott is probably on the higher end of my number. But he does do this work. He just helped Dignity Health with their rebranding and their brand strategy, which hasn't been launched yet, but I know he and his company did that. Logo work, brand design, a low of 18 up to, again, six figures. Brand story development, brand book, brand look and feel, 50,000 and up. I've seen that go all over. Talk to some of the agencies in the room. They can give you some better ideas on some of that work. Again, it really depends on your organization. You've been very patient. I've talked very fast. Thank you very much. I'll be at the booth all day today. Happy to take any of your questions. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you.